"Sir, please don't drink the tea." Adrian Vance had the cup almost to his mouth when the small voice stopped him. He lowered it slowly and looked across the long kitchen island at the little girl standing near the pantry door. She was 7 years old, in a faded school dress, 2 sizes too big, holding a dish towel against her chest like a shield. "Nia?" He set the cup down on its saucer without drinking. "What did you say?" "The tea," she said again. Her voice barely carried across the room. "And the honey. Don't put the honey in your oatmeal either. Please." He almost laughed. It was 7:15 in the morning. The lake outside the windows was still silver with mist, and the daughter of his housekeeper was telling him not to eat his own breakfast. He had built a hotel empire across 4 countries. He had sat across the table from men who would have ruined him for a handshake. And here was this child, barefoot on the cold tile, warning him about honey. "That's a strange thing to say," he said gently. "Did something fall in it? A bug?" Nia shook her head. She glanced once toward the hallway, the way a person checks a door before they speak, and then she came 2 steps closer and dropped her voice even lower. "I saw her last night," she whispered. "Miss Sloane. She was in the kitchen when everyone was asleep. She had a little bottle. She was breaking pills with the back of a spoon and stirring them into the honey jar. Then she smoothed the top so it would look like nobody touched it." The smile slid off Adrian's face, not because he believed her, because of how steady she was. Children lied with their whole bodies. Nia wasn't doing that. She was standing very still, the way frightened people stand when they have decided to be brave anyway. "Nia," he said, careful now, "that's a very serious thing to say about someone. Sloane is going to be my wife. Are you certain you didn't see her taking medicine for herself? A headache? Vitamins?" "It wasn't her medicine." Nia's chin trembled, but her eyes stayed on him. "She didn't take any. She only put it in your honey, the one with your name on the lid, the one you use." He had a jar of honey with his name written on the lid in marker. It was a small private joke in the house. Sloane had bought it for him in the spring, raw honey from a farm 2 valleys over, and she'd written Adrian's, hands off on the cap, because he hated when the staff used it for baking. He used it every single morning, a spoonful stirred into hot oatmeal, another into his tea. Everyone in the house knew that. It was the most predictable thing about him. He felt something cold turn over in his chest, but he kept his face calm. "If what you're saying were true," he said slowly, "why would she do it in front of you? Why would she let a child watch?" Nia looked down at her bare feet. "She didn't know I was there. I came down for water. The light was off and I was quiet. Then I knocked a stool, and it scraped the floor, and she turned around fast and saw me." "And then?" "She didn't yell." Nia swallowed. "She smiled. She knelt down so we were the same height. She said grown-ups have secrets sometimes, and that I was old enough to keep one. She said if I never told anyone what I saw, she would give my mom so much money my mom could stop cleaning houses forever. She said we'd live somewhere nice with a yard. She said it was just sleep medicine, that you work too hard and don't rest, and the pills would only help you sleep deeper." Adrian's hands had gone still on the table. "She tried to pay you." "Yes, sir." Nia's voice cracked just slightly. "She gave me an envelope. It's in my dress pocket. I told her okay, so she'd let me go back upstairs. But I didn't mean okay. I came down early to tell you before she woke up." For a long moment, the only sound in the kitchen was the soft tick of the coffee maker cooling. Adrian looked at the cup of tea. He looked at the jar of honey sitting innocently on the counter, the surface inside smooth and golden. He looked at the little girl who had been bought and had refused to stay bought. He was a careful man. He had not built what he built by trusting the first frightened voice in a room. He needed proof. But he also knew, the way you know weather is coming before the sky changes, that Some part of him already believed her. "Nia," he said quietly, "I can't accuse the woman I'm going to marry because of a story. You understand that? I need to be sure." "Then make her eat it." Nia said it so simply it took him a second to follow. "When she comes down, put the honey on the toast and ask her to take a bite. If I'm lying, then it's just honey and nothing happens. But if I'm telling the truth, she won't do it." Adrian stared at her. Outside, a heron lifted off the water and beat slowly across the lake. He had negotiated billion-dollar deals on less nerve than this child was showing him over a breakfast table. Before he could answer, he heard it. The click of heels on the stairs. Nia stepped back at once, dropped her eyes, and busied herself folding the dish towel as if she'd never said a word. The transformation was so complete it frightened him a little. She had clearly learned, somewhere, how to disappear in plain sight. Sloane came into the kitchen in a pale silk robe, her hair loose, looking like a perfume advertisement and smelling faintly of jasmine. She smiled when she saw him. "You're up early," she said, crossing to the counter, "and you haven't touched a thing. You'll be running on empty again. Eat something before you go save the world." "Morning," he said. He watched her glance at the honey jar, watched her glance at it the way you check a thing you've left somewhere on purpose. It was a small look. He would have missed it any other morning of his life. Sloane reached for the bread, dropped 2 slices in the toaster, and began making him breakfast the way she had, every morning, for the past 3 months. He found himself counting the days back. 3 months, around when she'd started insisting on getting up early to feed him. The toast popped. She buttered 1 slice, then reached for his honey jar and unscrewed the lid. "No," Adrian said, more sharply than he meant to. She looked up. He softened it. "I mean, let me do something. Sit with me a minute. Have a bite of toast with me first. You never eat in the mornings." "It worries me." Sloane laughed lightly. "I had coffee already." Just 1 bite. He spread a thick layer of the honey across the toast himself, slow, and held the slice out toward her across the island. "Humor me. You're always telling me to eat. Show me how good your fancy farm honey is." Something moved behind her eyes. It was fast, almost nothing, a flicker like a fish turning under dark water. Her smile stayed exactly where it was, which was the strange part. The smile didn't move at all while the rest of her recalculated. "I'm watching my sugar before the dress fittings," she said, and took a small step back. "You eat it. You're the one who skipped dinner. 1 bite won't ruin a dress." He kept the toast out, kept his voice easy and warm. "Come on. For me." She did not reach for it. The kitchen had gone very quiet. Even the lake outside seemed to hold still. Nia stood at the far counter with her back half turned, but Adrian could see the line of her shoulders, tight as wire. "Adrian." Sloane's laugh came out thinner now. "What is this? Some kind of test? You're being odd." "Maybe I am." He looked at her for 1 more second, then lowered the toast and set it down on the plate, the honey shining on top of it. "It's fine. I'll eat later." He watched her decide whether to push. She chose not to. She came around the island instead and kissed his cheek, light as a leaf, and her lips were cold. "You work too hard," she murmured. "It makes you strange." She picked her handbag off the stool. "I've got the planner at 9 and the spa after. I'll be back by 3. Don't skip lunch like you skip everything else." "Drive safe," he said. He listened to her heels cross the hall. He listened to the front door open and close. He listened to her car start in the courtyard, the tires roll over gravel, the gate motor hum and fall silent. For a long time he didn't move. Then he picked up a clean napkin, lifted the slice of honeyed toast without touching it, and slid it carefully into a sandwich bag. He sealed it. He picked up the honey jar with the napkin, looked at the smooth gold surface inside, and set it down again, exactly where it had been. When he finally spoke, his voice was level, but there was a new cold edge under it that hadn't been there at dawn. "Nia." She turned. From this moment on, you don't say one word about this to anyone. Not your mother, not a friend, not your teacher, no one. Do you understand me?" She nodded. "Do you know what you might have done this morning?" She shook her head. "You may have just saved my life." Nia was quiet for a moment. Then she said something in a small, careful voice that sounded far older than 7. "I didn't tell you because you're rich," she said. "I told you because she tried to buy me. My mom says people who try to buy children are never good people." Adrian looked at her for a long time, and then he nodded slowly because there was nothing he could add to that. He did not go to the office. He drove out of the gate, turned toward the highway, and then pulled onto a gravel shoulder under a stand of oaks where the lake house was out of sight, and he sat with both hands on the wheel and thought. In his world, when someone moved against you, panic was the most expensive thing you could do. Panic told the other side what you knew. He had watched competitors destroy themselves by reacting too fast. The men who survived were the ones who went quiet, gathered information, and let the people who'd attacked them keep believing they were ahead. He took out his phone and called Eli Booker. Booker had been a homicide detective for 19 years before Adrian hired him to run security across the company and the estate. He answered on the second ring, and he didn't waste words. "You don't call at 7:40 for nothing," Booker said. "What is it?" "I need 2 things," Adrian said. "First, I have a jar of honey and a piece of toast in my car. I need them tested, not just for sleeping pills, for anything that affects the heart. Cardiac drugs, sedatives, anything that builds up in the body over time if you take a little every day." There was a pause on the line, the kind a careful man takes before he asks the obvious question. "Whose honey?" "Mine." "Who's feeding it to you?" "Sloan." Booker exhaled, slow. "All right, I know a private lab that won't talk. Drop it with me this morning. What's the second thing?" "The kitchen camera," Adrian said. "I want the footage from last night, midnight to 2, and I want to pull it myself off the local drive without it going through the house account. I don't want anyone in that system to see it was accessed." "You've got someone in the house you don't trust with the cameras." "I've got someone in the house who installs the cameras." Sloan had insisted on the upgraded system in the winter. She'd chosen the company. She'd been there when they wired it. Booker was quiet again. "Bring me the food. I'll come to you tonight for the rest. Adrian, if she's putting cardiac drugs in your breakfast, this isn't a fight you win loud. You hear me?" "I hear you," Adrian said, and ended the call. That night he did not go to bed at his usual hour. Sloan came home a little after 9, glowing from the spa, full of talk about a vineyard venue and a string quartet and whether the napkins should be ivory or oat. He sat in the study and let her talk, and he watched her face while she did, and he could not find the seam. There was nothing there. She laughed. She touched his hand. She leaned her head on his shoulder and complained that the planner kept upselling her. If he had not held a frightened child's gaze that morning, he would have believed every syllable. When she finally went up to bed, he waited a full half hour. Then he walked down the back hall to a door most guests assumed was a linen closet. It wasn't. It held the central security system for the entire property. He closed the door behind him and brought up camera 4. Kitchen. He scrolled back. 12:51 a.m. The screen showed the dark kitchen, lit only by the thin strip of light under the cabinets. A minute of nothing. Then the door opened, and Sloan came in. She was in the silk robe. She moved without hurry, like someone who had done this before and expected to be alone. She set a small bottle on the counter, looked toward the hall once, and shook 2 pills into her palm. She laid them on the cutting board, took a spoon from the drawer, and pressed down, crushing them, scraping the white powder into a neat little line. Adrian leaned toward the monitor until his face was inches from the glass. She unscrewed his honey jar. She tapped the powder in. She stirred it down, deep, patient, working it into the gold so it wouldn't sit on top. Then she used the back of the spoon to smooth the surface flat and glossy, exactly the way Nia had described, so smooth that he would never have looked twice. She closed the lid. She dropped the bottle into her robe pocket, rinsed the spoon, killed the under-cabinet light, and went back to bed. He watched it again. And a third time. He watched her face on the last pass, the calm, focused, almost bored expression of a person doing chores. There was no hatred in it. That was somehow worse. Hatred would have been human. This was just a task on a list. He turned off the monitor and stood in the dark for a long time, his hand flat on the desk. He had felt this exact cold once before, years ago, the night the doctors told him his first wife wasn't going to wake up. The feeling of the ground you'd trusted your whole weight to turning out to be air. If this story is hitting you right now, do me a favor and let me know where you're watching from in the comments. And if you want to see how Adrian turns this around, make sure you're subscribed, because the next part is where everything changes. There was a soft knock on the study door. He'd come back to the study without realizing it. "Sir?" Nia's voice. "Are you still awake? Come in." She slipped inside, holding a stuffed rabbit by one ear. She looked at his face and knew at once. "You saw the camera," she said. He nodded once. "I saw all of it. Every second." She let out a breath, and her small shoulders came down a little. "I told the truth." "You did." He crouched so they were eye to eye, the way Sloane had done in the dark to buy her, except he wasn't buying anything. "Nia, I need you to listen to me very carefully now, because what we do next matters more than what we already did." She nodded. "She thinks she paid you, and you stayed quiet. We're going to let her keep thinking that. Tomorrow I'm going to come down and eat breakfast and talk about the wedding and smile, and she's going to believe her plan is working perfectly. And while she thinks she's winning, we're going to find out everything. Who's helping her? Why? How long? And we're going to get proof so clear that no lawyer alive can argue it away. Are we going to catch her?" Nia hugged the rabbit tighter. Adrian looked toward the dark hallway that led up to the bedroom where the woman he had almost married was sleeping. "Yes," he said, "we are." The next morning, the house looked exactly as it always had. Sun on the lake, coffee in the air, bread in the toaster. The only thing that had changed was invisible, and only two people in the house could feel it. Adrian came down in a charcoal suit, wearing the calm face he saved for hard negotiations. Sloane was already at the counter, spreading his honey on toast. "There he is," she said, smiling. "I made you a real breakfast for once. No excuses." "You're spoiling me." He sat. His eyes went to the honey jar for half a second and away. The surface inside was smooth and gold. "Coffee," she said, and poured it, and slid the plate in front of him. 2 slices, both glistening. "Eat while it's warm." He picked up his fork and worked at the oatmeal she'd set beside it, eating slowly, eating enough of the parts he knew were clean to look natural. He left the toast mostly alone. "You're skipping the toast again," she said lightly. Her eyes weren't light at all. "Doctor wants me off sugar in the mornings," he said. "Apparently my numbers were ugly at my last physical." It was the first piece of the story he was building, and he laid it down gently, like the first card in a long hand. "He's making noises about my heart." Something passed over Sloane's face. If he hadn't been watching for it, he'd have read it as concern. It wasn't concern. It was interest. "Your heart," she said. "Since when?" "Stress," he says. 20 years of it." He sipped the coffee, which was clean. She only ever touched the honey. "He wants more tests." "Then you should rest more." She came around and stood behind his chair, resting her hands on his shoulders. "Let me take better care of you. You forget to eat, you forget to sleep. If I don't watch you, who will?" "That's a good question," Adrian said quietly, and let her think it was sweet. Across the kitchen, Nia wiped a counter that was already clean and listened to every word. Booker came through the service entrance that afternoon while Sloane was out at a fitting. He was a heavy gray man with the patient, unimpressed eyes of someone who had spent 2 decades watching people lie to his face. Adrian played him the footage. Booker watched it once, leaned back, and rubbed his jaw. "That's not ambiguous, you're say. That's a person crowned. Crushing medication into food you eat every day. No prosecutor on earth squints at that." He pulled a folded paper from his coat. "And the honey came back." Adrian waited. "Digoxin," Booker said. "It's a real cardiac drug. Used right, it helps a weak heart. In the wrong dose, it's a killer, and it's a slow one. Builds up, throws the heart's rhythm off. A man your age drops dead, the death certificate says cardiac arrest, and nobody looks twice unless they're already looking. The level in that jar wasn't a dose. It was a sentence, paid out a spoonful at a time." Adrian set the paper down. He had known since the lab call was coming. Knowing for certain was different. It went through him like cold water. "How long would it take?" he asked. "Weeks. Maybe a month or 2 of mornings, depending on how much she was loading in and how your body handled it. Long enough to look natural. Short enough that she wasn't planning to wait forever." Booker watched him. "She's not improvising, Adrian. This is patient. This is a plan." "She doesn't want a scandal," Adrian said. "She wants a funeral she can cry at. Then we give her time and we give her rope." Booker opened a notebook. "I started digging the second you called me. You want the ugly part? All of it. On paper her life is tidy. Charity board, a foundation she consults for, no debt. But money's been moving into her accounts for the last 6 months from a company called Larkspur Capital. Larkspur has no offices, no staff, no real business. It's a shell. Money goes in, money comes out, and the only purpose it serves is to look like an income. That isn't one." "Who owns it?" "Working on it. It's buried under 2 other names. But here's the part that'll turn your stomach." Booker tapped the page. 3 months ago, a life insurance policy was taken out on you. 8 million, sole beneficiary, Sloane. 3 months. The same 3 months she'd started cooking his breakfast. "There's more," Booker went on. "She's been pushing your attorney's office. Twice in the last 6 weeks, she's asked your assistant about adding her as a co-trustee on the family trust once you're married. Says it's so she can help manage things if your health gets worse." He closed the notebook. "She's not just after the insurance. The insurance is the down payment. The company is the prize." Adrian walked to the window and looked at the lake, flat and bright and indifferent. "She's not doing this alone," he said. "Someone taught her about the trust, about the timing, about how the death has to look. She doesn't know how my company is structured. Someone who does is feeding it to her." "That's my read too," Booker said. "Find the money. Find the man." That evening, Adrian opened a locked drawer in his study and took out a thin black notebook he hadn't used in years. He had kept it back when he was young and broke, and learning the hard way that memory alone wasn't enough in a world built on lies. He wrote a name at the top of a clean page. Sloane Whitmore. Under it, he wrote everything. Insurance, 8 million, 3 months. Larkspur Capital, Shell, owner unknown. Pushing to be co-trustee. Digoxin in honey, slow cardiac. Witness, Naya. Bribery. Cash envelope. Threat against Nia's mother's job. He looked at the page for a long while. "This isn't a murder," he said softly to the empty room. "This is a takeover dressed up as a wedding." The next day, he called his attorney, Diane Okafor, and asked her to lunch somewhere no one from the business world would be. Diane had been his lawyer for 14 years and was almost impossible to surprise. She took one look at his face across the table and put down her menu. "This isn't lunch," she said. "What's happened?" He didn't tell her everything. He told her enough. He told her he wanted to change his will and the control structure of the company, immediately and quietly, and that if anything happened to him, Sloane was to have nothing. No control, no temporary authority, no signature on anything. Everything into a locked trust with Diane and Booker as co-executors, no sale of shares, and no transfer of control for 2 years after his death. Diane wrote without comment. When he finished, she set the pen down. "That's a man who thinks he's going to die soon," she said. "I'm a man who thinks someone is planning on it," Adrian said. She didn't flinch. She'd worked with powerful people too long to be shocked by the dashing things they survived. "I'll have the documents ready in 3 days. And Adrian, if I'm understanding what you're not saying, you don't sleep in that house another night without your eyes open." "I don't plan to sleep much at all," he said. When he got home, the house was too quiet. He found Nia at the small staff table near the kitchen, working through a math worksheet, the cash envelope still sitting untouched in front of her where he'd told her to leave it. "She gave me more," Nia said before he could ask. She pushed the envelope toward him. "After you left yesterday, she asked if I'd told you anything. I said no. Then she gave me this and said smart girls know when to be quiet." She paused. "And she said, if I'm not smart, this house could get very hard for my mom to work in." Adrian's jaw tightened. He picked up the envelope, opened it, and looked inside. It was thick. More cash than Nia's mother probably earned in 3 months of bleeding her hands raw on other people's floors. "Don't spend it. Don't move it. Don't even touch it more than you have to," he said. He set it down. "It's evidence now. Proof she paid you to stay quiet, and proof she threatened your mother to keep you that way." Nia nodded slowly. "Are you going to call the police now?" "Not yet. We still don't know who's helping her, and I want proof a jury can't argue with." He crouched beside the little table. "Which means I have to ask you to do something I don't like. From now on, you act like you took the money and decided to help her. You agree with her. You make her think you're on her side." Nia's eyes went wide. "You want me to lie?" "Yes." He didn't dress it up. "And I hate it. But if she believes you're with her, she'll talk in front of you. She'll make phone calls. She'll say things she'd never say in front of an enemy. People only get careless around people they think they own." Nia looked at the envelope for a long moment. "I don't like her," she said finally. "I know," Adrian said. "Neither do I. Not anymore." He stood and walked to the refrigerator, opened it, and looked at the honey shelf. There were 2 jars now. The poisoned one he'd already pulled, and a fresh one Sloane must have bought to replace what she thought he'd been eating. "She switched it," he said quietly. Nia came to stand beside him. "So she knows you didn't eat the old one." "She suspects, and that makes her nervous." He closed the door. "Nervous people speed up. They get sloppy. We're going to help her get nervous. Tonight I'm going to tell her the doctor found a real problem with my heart. If she thinks the poison's working, she'll relax, and she might switch to something faster, something she can give me herself. That's when she stops hiding and starts making mistakes." That evening, Sloane came home early, which was unusual. Adrian was waiting for it. He came down the stairs slowly, one hand brushing the rail, and when she looked up at him from the hall, her face filled with a concern that arrived a half-second too fast. "You look terrible," she said, hurrying to him. "What happened?" "Doctor called this afternoon." He let himself sink into the chair by the window like a man with no reserves left. "He doesn't like my last numbers. He thinks my heart's struggling, says it could be serious." For just a fraction of a second before she could stop it, something bright surfaced in Sloane's eyes. He'd seen it on the faces of buyers when a desperate seller named a low price. Hunger. It was there and gone. "Oh, Adrian." She knelt and took his hands. "We'll get through it. You're not alone anymore. I'm here." "I know," he said. "That's a comfort." And he watched her file away the news like a date on a calendar. That night she was kinder than he had ever seen her. She brought him water. She reminded him to take a vitamin she set beside his plate. She offered to cook every meal herself. She asked lightly what time he'd be leaving for work in the morning, and what time he'd be home, and whether he'd be alone at the lake house during the day. He answered all of it like a tired man too grateful for the attention to notice he was being measured. She wasn't planning a wedding anymore. She was building a timeline. 2 days later, Booker came back with the rest of it. They sat in the study with the door shut. "I found who owns Larkspur," Booker said, and slid a single sheet across the desk. There was one name on it. Roland Price. Adrian read it and felt the floor shift. "I know that name." "Figured you might." Booker watched him. Disgraced money manager, lost his license years back for running other people's retirements into projects that funneled back to him. Did 18 months. Came out, dropped off the radar. Officially, he's nobody now. He paused. Unofficially, he's the man who's been in this house twice that I can prove, introduced to your staff as Sloane's cousin, her financial advisor cousin, helping with the wedding budget. Her cousin. Adrian said it flat. They're not related. They were married 11 years ago in another state under another spelling of his name. There's no record they ever divorced. Booker let that sit. She's not his fiancée's cousin, Adrian. He's her husband. You're not the wedding, you're the job. Adrian sat very still. He had walked his first wife through a hospital corridor years ago and felt the world go out from under him, and he had sworn he'd never let his weight rest on bad ground again, and somehow he'd done exactly that. He'd let a stranger learn his mornings, his honey, his routines, the precise hour he was alone because she'd been good to him at a time when he was tired and didn't want to be alone anymore. "They picked me," he said. "They specialize in it," Booker said. "Lonely, rich, recently widowed. You weren't unlucky. You were chosen." He leaned forward. "Which means we don't just need her crushing pills on camera. We need both of them, on the record, talking about the plan. The money, the death, and the company. Something a defense attorney can't pretend is a cooking lesson." At that moment, a soft knock came at the door. "Sir?" Nia on the other side. "She's in the garden. She's on the phone. She didn't want to take it inside." The two men looked at each other. "That's new," Adrian said. He stood. "Stay here." He went out the side door and moved slow along the line of tall hedges that ran beside the garden path until he could hear her voice carrying on the still evening air. "Told you. The doctor saying, it's his heart now," Sloane was saying. There was a pause while the other end spoke. "No, we don't rush it. If he drops too fast, people ask questions. It has to look like the heart finally gave out. He's 44. He works himself to the bone. It's believable." Another pause. "Yes, I know about the insurance. I'm not a child. But the policy's the small money. Once we're married, I get a foot in the trust, and from there the whole thing comes apart in our favor." A laugh, low and ugly. "Just have the paperwork ready. When it happens, I don't want a single day's delay on the accounts." She ended the call and stood there a moment, looking out over the garden in the gold light, beautiful and calm, like a woman thinking about flowers. Adrian stepped back behind the hedge before she could turn and walked to the house with no expression on his face at all. "You were right," he told Booker back in the study. "She's not alone. He was on the line. They're already planning the day after I'm dead." Booker's jaw set. "Then we get them both in one room, with everything running." The next 2 days passed in a strange, careful quiet that never lifted from the house. Adrian got better at his part. He came down a little slower each morning. He pressed 2 fingers to his chest now and then, as if testing for a pain, and let her catch him doing it. He left more of the food untouched and blamed his appetite. He told her, in pieces, the story of a heart that was failing, and he watched her gather every piece up and hold it close. She moved the goalposts, exactly as Booker had said she would. The honey was too slow now, and she knew he wasn't eating it. So one evening she sat with Nia in the kitchen and set a small amber bottle on the counter. "These are heart drops," she told the girl, gentle as anything. "The doctor wants Mr. Vance to have them. They taste bitter, so we put them in his juice where he won't notice. Tomorrow I'll show you how many. You're going to help me take care of him, aren't you?" "Yes, ma'am," Nia said, softly, and kept her eyes on the floor so Sloane wouldn't see what was in them. From the dark hall, Adrian listened to every word. When Sloane went up, Nia came out and found him there. "She wants me to put it in your juice," she whispered. "Tomorrow. What do we do?" He looked down at the small, frightened, fierce face, and a cold calm settled all the way through him. "Tomorrow," he said, "we give her exactly what she wants." That night Booker came back through the service door after dark, and the two of them worked in the unlit study while the house slept. "Tiny," Booker murmured, standing on a chair near the bookshelf, fixing a camera no bigger than a button, one in the kitchen on the table, one on the counter where she pours, one in the dining room. Audio's already running off the house system, clean feed to my laptop and a backup off-site. He climbed down. "You sure you want it tomorrow? Once she does it on camera, there's no walking it back." Adrian stood in the doorway, hands in his pockets, his face quiet in the dark. "There was no walking it back the night she crushed those pills into my honey," he said. "I just didn't know it yet." Booker nodded slowly. "Then tomorrow we let her try again." After he left, Adrian walked into the kitchen and stood by the table where he'd eaten breakfast nearly every morning for years. He ran his hand along the back of his chair. It had been his favorite room in the house once. The lake out the window, the smell of coffee, the quiet before the day. Now it felt like a stage someone had set for his death. A soft sound made him turn. Nia stood in the doorway with a glass of water. "I saw the man again today," she said. "The one she calls her cousin. He came while you were out. They talked in the garden and I heard them through the window." "What did they say?" "He talked about papers, signatures, and she said the doctor thinks your heart is weak and that it would only be a few more weeks." Nia's voice dropped. She wasn't sad about it. He laughed. Adrian closed his eyes for a second. They were scheduling his death like a closing date on a building. "That's good," he said, surprising her. "Good? It means we know both of them now, and tomorrow they're going to hand us everything we still need." In the morning he made sure it all unfolded the way Sloane expected. He came down slow, holding the rail. He coughed once. He sat heavily at the table like a man whose body was quitting on him. Sloane was already at the counter, and when she saw him her face filled with that warm, careful concern. "You shouldn't be up," she said, hurrying over. "You look worse than yesterday." "Didn't sleep," he said, and that part was true. Chest felt tight all night. "Sit. I'll bring your juice." She poured orange juice into a glass, then took the amber bottle from her bag and didn't even pretend to hide it this time. She uncapped it, looked at Nia, and held it out. "Go on, you do it today. 5 drops. Count them." Nia froze for half a second. Then she took the bottle in steady fingers and let 5 drops fall into the juice. They vanished into the orange. "Good girl," Sloane said softly. "You see? Easy. This is how we help him." Adrian watched from the table with the heavy, half-lidded eyes of a man too tired to track what was happening around him. Inside, every second of it was sharp as glass. Sloane set the glass in front of him. "Drink. It'll help." He reached for it, then paused and looked up at her. "Sit with me," he said. "I don't want to drink it alone." A flicker of impatience, masked at once. She sat across from him. He held the glass and looked at the orange liquid for a moment. "You know," he said quietly, "when my first company nearly went under, I thought that was the worst thing that could ever happen to me, losing everything I'd built." Sloane said nothing. Her eyes were on the glass. But that wasn't the worst thing. He turned the glass slowly in his hand. "The worst thing is finding out the person sitting across the table from you was never the person you thought they were." Her eyes lifted to his face, and for just a moment something wary crossed them. "What do you mean?" He smiled, faint and tired. "Nothing. I'm just rambling. Old men ramble. And he raised the glass. But as he raised it, he set his other hand on the table near the second glass. Chapter 9 now, the clean one. The one Nia had filled with plain juice and placed there a minute earlier while Sloane's back was turned at the counter. Sloane reached over to slide him a napkin, and in the half-second her eyes left his hands. The glasses changed places. He drank the clean one down, slow, while she watched. He set the empty glass on the table and leaned back and let his eyes fall closed, like a man giving in to exhaustion. "You feel all right?" she asked, watching his face very closely. "Just tired," he murmured. "I think I'll lie down." "I'll help you up." She was on her feet at once. She got an arm around him and walked him toward the stairs. He let himself sway against her halfway up, let her take more of his weight, let her feel how weak he'd become. Behind them, Nia stood by the counter with her hands cold and her heart slamming, watching the woman walk the man she thought she was killing up to his room. Sloane settled him on the bed and stood over him a moment, waiting, the way you wait to see if a thing is working. He slowed his breathing until it went deep and heavy, the breath of a man falling into a drugged sleep. She watched. Then she smiled, leaned down, and pressed her lips to his forehead. "You should have just trusted me," she whispered. "It would have been so much gentler." She turned and walked out, and pulled the door shut softly behind her. The moment the latch clicked, Adrian opened his eyes. He lay still, staring at the ceiling, listening to her steps fade down the hall, down the stairs, into the kitchen. Then he reached into the nightstand drawer and took out the small remote Booker had given him and pressed the button that woke the recorders downstairs. He moved to the door and opened it a crack, then lay back down and watched the thin line of light across the floor. In the kitchen, Sloane came in and found Nia at the sink. "Is he down?" she asked. "He went to sleep," Nia said quietly. "He looked very tired." Sloane leaned against the counter and crossed her arms, looking toward the ceiling as if she could see through it. "You did well this morning," she said. "You see how simple it is? You're helping him rest. You're helping him stop hurting." She didn't lower her voice. She thought she was alone with a child she'd bought. It won't be much longer now. A few more mornings. His heart's already weak. The doctor said so himself. "What happens after?" Nia asked in the small, careful voice of a child asking nothing in particular. Sloane studied her, then decided she was harmless. "After, everything changes. This house becomes mine. The company comes under my control until it all transfers over. There's more money in it than you could ever count. Your mother will never scrub another floor as long as she lives. And you'll go to a real school. Nice clothes. A different life entirely." "And Mr. Vance?" Nia asked. Sloane glanced toward the ceiling again. "He's tired," she said softly. "Men like him burn out. Stress takes them every day of the week. It'll be very sad." She laid a hand over her own heart, practicing the grief. "But life goes on." Upstairs, Adrian lay listening through a small earpiece, and he made himself unclench his hands. Sloane took out her phone and turned half away, but her voice still carried to the microphones taped under the counter. "It's me," she said. "He drank it this morning. The girl did it herself, clean. He's fading, barely makes it up the stairs now. A few more and we won't have to wait." A pause. The other voice came faint but audible. "How long?" "Soon. He nearly went under right at the table." "And the trust?" "He's already talking about changing his paperwork because of his health. I'll be inside it before anything happens to him. I'll make sure I'm holding the pen." "You'd better. We didn't spend a year on this to lose it." "We won't. Once he's gone, the company's mine to steer. We move the shares, sell what we need, and walk." A small pause. "And the kid?" Sloane looked over at Nia's turned back. "The kid likes money, and her mother needs the job. They won't be a problem." She ended the call, slipped the phone into her bag, and walked over to Nia. She set a hand lightly on the girl's shoulder. "You're doing the right thing," she said. "Remember that. You're helping him. And you're helping your mother." "Yes, ma'am," Nia said, and did not turn around. Upstairs, Adrian opened his eyes and stared at the ceiling and thought very calmly, "The kid likes money." He almost laughed. There was nothing funny in any of it. Sloane came up a few minutes later to check on him. He shut his eyes and slowed his breath just before the door opened. She crossed to the bed and stood over him, watching his chest rise and fall, watching his arm lie limp on the blanket. She reached out and touched his forehead, gentle as a wife. "You should have just loved me and let me handle the rest," she murmured. "It would have been easier on you." He didn't move. After a moment, she straightened, satisfied, and left. When the door closed, he sat up and picked up his phone and pressed one button. Booker answered on the first ring. "Did we get it?" "We got everything," Adrian said quietly. Her voice, his voice, the plan, the company, the money, all of it. There was a short silence on the line. "What do you want to do?" Adrian rose and went to the window and looked out over the lake and the long lawn and the property he'd spent half his life building from nothing. "Tomorrow night," he said. "We end it, and I want him in the room when it happens." The next day moved slow, like the air before a storm. Adrian came down late, kept the performance going. He touched his chest, held the rail, let his voice come out thin. Sloane fussed over him, and her concern had a brightness underneath it now that she didn't bother to hide as well as she used to. "The doctor called," he told her, sitting heavily at the table. "He wants me admitted for tests next week. Says my rhythm's all wrong." He let his eyes drift. "I've been thinking. If something happens to me, I don't want to leave things in a mess. The board panics, the lawyers fight, the accounts freeze for a year. It would be chaos." Sloane sat down across from him, listening hard now. "I built all of it from nothing," he went on. "The company, the foundation, every piece. I don't want you fighting that fight alone if I'm gone." He looked at her. "I want you protected." He watched her work to keep her face soft while her mind moved fast. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying I want you and one other person to come to dinner tomorrow night. Someone who understands the business. Someone who could guide you through it if I'm not here." He let the word land. "I was thinking of your cousin, Roland. He's in finance, isn't he? You always say how sharp he is." For half a second Sloane forgot to breathe. He saw the calculation flash across her, the surprise, the greed, the careful wrestling of all three, back under her calm. "That's actually a wonderful idea," she said slowly. "Roland would know exactly what to do. I'll call him." "Tomorrow," Adrian said. 7 o'clock. Tell him it's important." She was already reaching for her phone. Across the kitchen, Nia stood very still by the sink. When Sloane stepped into the hall to make the call, the girl looked at Adrian. "Tomorrow," she whispered. He nodded once. "Tomorrow night. It ends. Are you scared?" He thought about it honestly. "No," he said. "Not scared. Just sad that I have to be." The next evening, the house had been cleaned to a shine. Sloane had Nia's mother prepare a real dinner. Roast, vegetables, wine, the good plates they only used for important guests. From the outside, it looked like a celebration. In a way, it was. Just not the one Sloane thought. At 3 minutes to 7, a black car came up the drive. Nia was in the hall when the bell rang. She opened the door to a tall man, near 60, silver-haired in a coat that cost more than her mother made in a season. He smiled down at her, and it was the kind of smile that never reaches the eyes. "Good evening," Roland Price said. "Is Mr. Vance in?" "Yes, sir," Nia said quietly. "Please come in." He stepped over the threshold like a man already measuring the place for himself. Sloane came down the stairs, radiant. "Roland, thank you for coming." "For you?" he said, and kissed her cheek. Always. Adrian came into the hall slowly, playing the tired man, and put out his hand. Roland? It's been a while. Too long. Roland shook it, and his eyes went over Adrian with cool assessment. You don't look well, Adrian. I don't feel well, Adrian said. That's why I asked you here. They sat at the long dining table. Sloane poured wine. The roast was served. From any window, it looked like 3 successful people sharing a quiet, elegant meal. Under the lip of the table, taped where no one would think to look, a recorder turned. In a back room, Booker sat with 2 police officers, watching the live feed from the hidden cameras on a laptop, the audio clean in their ears. They let dinner run 20 minutes. Adrian ate little, listened much, let Roland and Sloane carry the conversation toward all the right places. Then he set down his fork. I'll be straight with you both, he said. My health is failing. The doctors are worried about my heart. If something happens to me, Sloane will be alone, and the company is going to be complicated. He looked at Roland. I want you to help her through it. The shares, the accounts, the transition. You understand how these things work better than anyone she has. Roland nodded slowly, the picture of grave sympathy. That's a heavy responsibility, he said. I'm honored you'd ask. But why me? Adrian looked at him for a long moment. Because if I die, he said, I know the 2 of you already have a plan for what happens next. You've had one for months. The room went still. Sloane's head came up. Roland's hand stopped halfway to his glass. I know about the honey, Adrian said, in the same even voice he used to close deals. I know about the digoxin. I know about the heart drops in the juice. I know about the $8 million policy. I know about Larkspur Capital. And I know it's yours, Roland. I know you 2 were married 11 years ago and never divorced. And I know about the phone calls in my garden, where you scheduled the day I was supposed to die. Sloane's face went the color of paper. Roland set his glass down very carefully. Adrian, he said, calm as a man stepping onto thin ice and pretending it's stone. You sound confused. You're not well. None of this is what you think. Adrian pressed the small remote in his palm. From the speakers wired into the dining room, Sloane's own voice filled the air. He drank it this morning. The girl did it herself, clean. He's fading. A few more, and we won't have to wait. Sloane stared at the speaker as if it had grown out of the wall. Then Roland's recorded voice followed. Once he's gone, the company's mine to steer. We move the shares, sell what we need, and walk. The recording stopped. Nobody moved. Adrian leaned back in his chair and looked at the 2 of them, and his eyes were no longer tired, no longer dim. They were the eyes of a man who had spent 2 weeks letting people believe he was already dying. Dinner's over, he said. At that exact moment, the front door opened, and Booker walked in with 2 uniformed officers behind him. Sloane shot to her feet so fast her chair went over backward. Adrian, I can explain. Please. No, Adrian said quietly. You can explain to them. Roland recovered first, the way men like him always did, certain that there was still a way out if they could just keep talking. Officers. He rose with his hands lifted, easy, reasonable. I think everyone needs to slow down. This is a private conversation being taken wildly out of context. No one here has hurt anyone. Sir, hands where I can see them, one of the officers said. Of course. Roland smiled, the smile of a man used to charming his way out of locked rooms. I'm only saying we should be careful before we make a mistake we can't undo. Sloane found her voice, and it changed completely, the cold gone, replaced by something soft and desperate. Adrian, please, it's not what it sounds like. The medication, it was to help your heart. I was trying to take care of you. Adrian looked at her, and what was in his face wasn't anger anymore. It was something closer to grief. You were crushing digoxin into my honey, he said. No prescription, No doctor, no word to me. And you told your husband on the phone that a few more mornings and you wouldn't have to wait. I said you'd be resting." Her voice cracked. "You're twisting it." Booker stepped forward and set a second recorder on the table and pressed play, and her voice came out of it again, unmistakable, talking about a few more mornings and his weak heart and not having to wait. He let it run a few seconds and turned it off. The silence after was final. An officer moved behind Roland and drew his hands back. "Roland Price, you're under arrest for conspiracy to commit murder and financial fraud." Roland didn't resist, but his eyes found Adrian. "You think this makes you clever," he said softly. "You think you've won something." Adrian didn't answer him. There was nothing worth saying. The second officer turned to Sloane. "Ma'am, turn around, hands behind your back." She didn't move. She was staring at Adrian, her eyes wet now. "Adrian, I loved you, I did. You have to believe I'd never really have let it go all the way." "You picked out wedding flowers while you were poisoning my breakfast," Adrian said. "You laughed about my funeral on the phone in my own garden. Don't tell me about love." The softness fell off her like a mask coming loose, and underneath it was something hard and bright and cold. "You were a lonely man with too much money and a dead wife you wouldn't stop mourning," she said. "Do you have any idea how easy you were? A few charity galas, a few sad stories told back to you, pretending I understood your long nights. You didn't want a wife. You wanted someone to admire you. I just gave you what you were begging for." "Turn around," the officer said. She turned, slow, and let him take her wrists, but she kept her eyes on Adrian the whole time. "You think you're better than everyone because you built something," she said. "But you're just another rich man who thought money made him safe. It doesn't. It just makes you a target." Then, as the officers turned them toward the door, Sloane's head snapped toward the hall where Nia stood small and silent, watching everything. "You," Sloane said, and her voice went venomous. "This is you. Do you understand what you've thrown away? Do you have any idea how much money you just buried? You and your mother could have had a whole different life." Nia didn't move. She didn't look away. She stood there with her hands at her sides and a calm on her small face that didn't belong to a child. "My mom says money that comes from hurting people isn't a blessing," Nia said quietly. "It's a curse." Sloane's face twisted. "You stupid girl. You chose loyalty over a fortune. That's exactly why people like you stay where you are." "No," Adrian said. He stepped between them. "People like you are the reason the world needs people like her." Sloane looked at him one last time, and there was nothing left in her face but the hatred. No charm, no warmth, nothing she'd ever pretended to be. Then the officers walked them both out, and the front door closed, and the house went quiet. But it was a different quiet now. Not the quiet of secrets and poison and lies. The quiet of something finally ending. Adrian stood in the dining room a long time. The table was still set. 3 glasses of wine, half-eaten plates, a dinner that had started like a celebration and ended like a courtroom. Booker came back in and looked at him. "You did the right thing." "I know," Adrian said. He didn't sound like a man who had won. He sounded like a man who had lost something he'd wanted to be true. He found Nia in the hall, still watching the door where they'd taken Sloane out. "It's over," he said gently. "Is she going to jail?" "Yes, she and Roland both." Nia was quiet. "Are you sad?" He thought about it carefully, because she deserved a real answer. "Yes," he said, "but not because she's gone. I'm sad because I didn't see who she really was. I almost handed my life to the wrong person. That's a hard thing to look at." "I was scared," Nia said. "The whole time." "I know. Being brave doesn't mean you're not scared. It means you do the right thing anyway." He looked down at her. "You did that. When it would have been easier to take the money and say nothing, you told the truth. That's the bravest thing a person can do, and you did it at 7 years old, in a house full of grown-ups who'd have looked away." At that moment, Nia's mother, Rose, came rushing in from the back of the house, having seen the police cars in the drive, her face pale with fear. "What's happened?" she said. "Is everything all right? Did Nia do something?" "Everything's all right now," Adrian said. "Your daughter didn't do anything wrong. She did more right than anyone in this house." He looked at the two of them standing there, the cleaner and her child, who between them had almost nothing and had saved his life anyway. "I think it's time we talked about a different future for you both. One where nobody has to lie, or hide, or be afraid." The morning after the arrests, the house felt unfamiliar. Nothing had changed about it. The same sun came off the lake, the same coffee maker hummed, but something invisible had lifted off the walls, like a fever breaking in the night. Adrian woke early and went down, and for the first time in 2 weeks he was actually hungry. He stood in the kitchen and looked at the table, the counter, the refrigerator, ordinary things that had nearly become weapons. Then he opened the fridge, took out eggs, and started cooking for himself. Nia came in and stopped in the doorway, surprised. "You're cooking?" He smiled a little. "I've decided I'm never going to eat honey again as long as I live, so I'd better learn to make a few other things." She almost smiled back. He set 2 plates of eggs and dry toast on the table. "Sit, you've got school." They ate in quiet for a while. "Is it really over?" Nia asked. "It's over. She's not coming back." "The house feels different." "It is different," he said, "because nobody in it is pretending anymore." After breakfast he asked Nia and Rose to sit with him in the front room. Rose came in nervous, the way people get nervous when a wealthy man asks to talk, already bracing for the worst. "Did we do something, If it's about Nia being in the kitchen, hearing grown-up things, I'm sorry. We can find another place. I don't want trouble." "You didn't do anything wrong," Adrian said. "Sit, please." He told them in plain words what he'd decided after a long night and a long conversation with Diane. He was buying them a house. Not a mansion, a good house, in a safe neighborhood, near a good school. It would be in Rose's name, free and clear. Rose stared at him as if she'd misheard. "Sir, we can't take something like that. It's too much." "It isn't too much," he said. "A house is just money. I have money. What your daughter gave me was something I couldn't have bought at any price." He looked at Nia. "She told me the truth when staying quiet would have made her family rich. She protected a man who had no claim on her loyalty. I don't forget that. He was setting up an education fund for Nia, too. School, college, whatever she wanted to do one day, paid for, no strings." Rose's eyes filled. She tried to speak and couldn't. "You don't have to say anything," Adrian said. "Just promise me one thing." "Anything," she whispered. "Stop telling your daughter that rich people are smarter than you. It isn't true. I've sat across the table from a great many rich and powerful people, and some of them were the stupidest, cruelest people I've ever met. And the bravest, most honest person I've met in years is sitting right there in a dress 2 sizes too big." He looked at Nia. "Money didn't save my life. She did. All she had was the truth, and she didn't sell it. That's worth more than anything in this house." 3 months later, Adrian Vance stood at a window high above a city street, watching people who had no idea how close he had come to dying in his own kitchen. From the outside, life looked normal again. The company was steady. The board had calmed. The lawyers had done their work. Sloan Whitmore and Roland Price were both awaiting trial, their names in the business journals under words like conspiracy and fraud and attempted murder. But normal didn't mean to him what it used to. His mornings were different now. He cooked his own food. He didn't rush through breakfast reading market reports. He no longer believed danger came from rivals and strangers across a boardroom. He understood now that the most dangerous person in the world is the one who's learned your habits. The hour you wake, the way you take your tea, the precise time you're alone. He paid attention to people now, not just to numbers. That afternoon he left the office early and drove 20 minutes out to a quiet neighborhood of small, well-kept houses with trees in the yards and bicycles on the sidewalks. He parked in front of a white house with a blue door. Nia opened it before he could knock, as if she'd been watching at the window. "You're early," she said. "I said I'd come see the new place." He stepped inside. It smelled of fresh paint and something cooking. Rose came out of the kitchen drying her hands, still looking like she wasn't quite used to living somewhere that was hers. "You didn't have to drive all this way," she said. "I wanted to." He looked around. "It's good. It feels peaceful." "It's quiet at night," Nia said. "Not like the old apartment. And Mom doesn't come home so tired." "I still work," Rose said, smiling. "Just not 3 jobs." They sat at the small dining table. It was nothing like the long table in his house, but he looked more at ease at it than he'd been at his own in years. "How's school?" he asked. "Hard," Nia said honestly. "But good. The teachers say if I keep reading the way I do, I can skip a grade." "I'm not surprised." There was a comfortable quiet, and then Nia asked, "Are you still scared when you eat breakfast?" He thought about it. "Not scared," he said. "But I pay attention now. I think about who's at the table with me. That matters more than what's on it." Nia turned that over for a while. "Mom says you saved us," she said. He shook his head. "That's not true. You saved me. All I did was listen." He paused. "And I almost didn't. Do you know how many men in my position would have laughed at a child and finished their tea? I came that close." He held up 2 fingers, barely apart. "That close." "I almost didn't tell you either," Nia admitted quietly. "The money she gave me was more than I'd ever seen. For 1 minute, I thought about keeping quiet." "That's exactly what makes what you did matter," Adrian said. "If doing the right thing were easy, everyone would do it. Sometimes it costs you something. But doing the wrong thing costs you who you are, and you don't always get that back." Rose sat down with them. "I've been trying to teach her that. But the world has a way of making honesty feel like just another reason to stay poor." "When I was young, I thought money fixed everything," Adrian said. "And some things it does fix. It buys comfort. It buys time. It can even buy a kind of safety." He looked at Nia. "But it can't buy a clean conscience, and it can't buy a person who will tell you the truth when a lie would pay them better." Nia frowned a little. "Why are you still helping us? You already gave us the house, and the school money." Adrian smiled, and there was something quiet and a little sad in it. "Because a long time ago, someone told me that success isn't about how much you keep," he said. "It's about what you protect. And a few months back, when I didn't even know my own life was in danger, a 7-year-old girl decided to protect me instead of herself." He stood and went to the door and turned back to look at them. "People call me a self-made man. That isn't true anymore. I'm still here because someone else chose to be brave." Nia didn't know what to say, so she just stood, holding the door. He walked to his car and stopped before he got in and looked back at the small house with the blue door. A few months ago, he had nearly died in a mansion full of expensive things and quiet lies. Now he stood on a peaceful street in front of a little house where the people inside had almost nothing but honesty and the nerve to do the right thing. He got in and sat a moment before starting the engine, thinking of the honey and the pills and the recordings and the cold smile on a woman's face. And then he thought of a small voice at his breakfast table saying, "Sir, please don't drink the tea." He started the car and pulled away slow, the house growing smaller in his mirror. Some people spend their whole lives building wealth. Adrian Vance had learned that the most valuable thing he nearly lost wasn't his company, or his money, or his house. It was the chance to know who he could trust. And sometimes the person who saves your life isn't a doctor, or a guard, or a lawyer. Sometimes it's just the one person in the room who refuses to sell their silence. This story carries a simple but heavy lesson. Evil rarely walks in as a stranger. More often, it sits at your table, smiles at you, tells you it cares. Intelligence and money and success can't protect a person from betrayal if they hand their trust to the wrong hands. But the story teaches something larger, too. Courage and honesty don't belong only to the powerful. Sometimes the bravest person in the room is the one with the least to gain and the most to lose. Doing the right thing won't always make you rich, but it lets you keep yourself. And in the end, trust and truth are worth more than any fortune. If this story moved you, take a second to like the video and tell me in the comments where you're watching from. And if you want more stories where quiet people find the courage to do the right thing, subscribe so you never miss the next one.